Let's talk about the easiest healers to play in 10-5. In Dragonflight, when healing is hard because you need a lot of HPS and sometimes you need a lot of DPS and sometimes you just need to get into groups. So actually playing a spec can be harder for some than it is for others. But if you want to pick a healer and you are interested in learning this beautiful role that we need so many more people to play, what is the easiest to get into? And we're going to start it off with Resto Shaman, one of my all-time favorite healers, but this is not about the favorite healer of Flame from Marcelian&Online. This is about the easiest healer, and Resto Shaman is fairly easy. Do I want to put it into the easiest? Is it the easiest? Probably. It is a little bit of personal bias because I have played Resto Shaman for way longer than probably any other healer here, so I have most experience on it, so it comes easiest for me to heal with Resto Shaman. Now, just because it's the easiest, that doesn't mean, you don't really have to do a bunch of things. They have nerfed Cloudburst Totem quite a bit, and this used to be one of the hardest things to do with Resto Shaman, is optimizing your Cloudburst ramp, popping it at the right time with the exact amount of healing that you needed for your group. Now that's kind of gone. You can actually not even play this talent anymore, and you just play Healing Stream back to back and things just happen super passively. Chain Heal is super strong. It's more or less smart healing, so it only targets injured people. And now the playstyle with the tier set in dungeons, at the very least, you don't really do much, and in raids it can get a little bit micromanagey, but at the end of the day it's still a pretty simple healer to play. Not a lot of mechanics and intricacies going into it, so it's going to be in, well, normally where the S tier is, but it's going to be in the easiest tier because that's where it belongs. And where you belong is in our patreon.com/MarcelianOnline page and checking out our Patreon goods. Why? Well, because the Patreon actually supports the content that we do. We would super be grateful if you did check it out. You don't have to do anything, you can just check it out, see what goodies you can get access to, because you do have other things you can get your hands on if you do decide to support the content that we do. Stuff like bloopers, stuff like customized wallpapers with your character, all skilled into marvelous 4K. Plus, indeed, you will be supporting your boys here at Marcelian&Online, and that definitely helps in this trying age of YouTube stuff, because we want to do cool videos in the future as well. YouTube doesn't really like that. But hey, we appreciate all of the support that we get. We love you, Patrons, for sticking with us and keeping the lights on. And let's talk about Discipline Priest and see exactly where Discipline actually belongs. Now, Discipline used to be one of the hardest healers in the game. Now, it has been kind of reworked going into 10.2, where, well, for instance, we don't have Shadow Covenant anymore as a button to press. We don't have Schism anymore as a button to press. We do have Ultimate Penance, but that's, that's just pure angelic fun. You don't really need to, think too much about it. Well, that's not true, because if you don't do Ultimate Penance right, you will die. Since the animation is quite long, you're kind of stuck in the same position, things can hit you. Thankfully, I don't think that nothing can interrupt your Ultimate Penance, but you can still take damage. However, if you have your atonements right before you start your Ultimate Penance, it's hardly any mechanic that can one-shot you unless you're doing super high keys. But if you're doing super high keys, you probably already know what you're doing. However, I think Discipline Priest is probably at least hard. I want to say the hardest. So here's my thought process on it. It would be the hardest if we're talking about somebody that's never healed before and being used to just selecting a target, pressing a couple of heals, and that target gets healed to full. For Discipline, it's a little bit harder. You will see like beginner Discipline Priests struggling a lot keeping your party alive, but actually expert Discipline Priests having like an easy time keeping the people up and doing a lot of damage in the process. It's not as straightforward as Resto Shaman. You don't have that much single target healing as Resto Shaman does, as we found out. So stuff like, I don't know, Waycrest Manor, the Nettles things that you have to heal a target to full. On Tyrannical, that can be a pain to heal. Or Throne the Tides, the Flame Shock mechanic. I unfortunately went a little bit undergeared there and my targets died because I couldn't keep it up. So that's some struggles that Discipline Priest has to go through and why it's hard. But considering that the rotation has been simplified drastically, you don't even play mind games anymore, it's way easier to play in 10-5. It can be harder to play if you change a lot of talents, but in 10-5 right now, it's just hard. It's not the hardest. Holy Paladin is a different beast nowadays, and I did actually finally play it a little bit more because after the Paladin rework, I was kind of positive on it in the way that its design worked in theory, okay? Because it made casting heals work better and towards building holy power for you. It didn't feel like I just had to spam Crusader Strike, Holy Shock, Crusader Strike, Holy Shock, which was the playstyle for years. That got a little bit boring. So here's how I see Holy Paladin. It's probably the hardest healer to play. Or I'm not going to talk too much about fun, but I am going to talk about the fact that if you do decide to pick up Holy Paladin today, there's a lot of intricacies going into it that you might not see at first glance. There are a lot of combo heals that you need to go through. It still feels like it's a cooldown reliant healer most of the time. And that's something that, let's say, Resto Shaman doesn't have to go through, because Resto Shaman has fat heals even without cooldowns. But Holy Paladins without cooldowns are slightly on the weaker side. Plus, you're going to be in melee a lot of the time. Thankfully, you are still a paladin, so you're pretty tanky and you have a lot of utility. But in terms of how busy this is, maybe because I've also have some of the least amount of experience on Holy Paladin out of all of the healers, that I find it the hardest actually. So that says a little bit about the spec. So keep that in mind, take it with a pinch of salt, that, you know, maybe it's not as hard for you. But for me, Holy Paladin is, I think it's the hardest healer to play, period, in terms of its playstyle. I'm trying to, you know, put myself in the shoes of somebody that has never healed before and is picking up Holy Paladin for the first time. You're probably still gonna struggle a little bit, because it's not the old school, oh, that target is damaged, I'm just gonna cast Holy Light and that's gonna be it. It's not gonna be it. You have some Tears Deliverance, and I forgot some of the names changed. The 1.5 minute 2 cooldowns that you pair up, and then you just combo Holy Light after Holy Light. Everybody explodes. You play 2 beacons. To be fair, a lot of people criticize Holy Paladin, and I actually found it surprisingly fun and enjoying to play. I can see why a lot of people would struggle, because you wouldn't struggle as much on, let's say, Holy Priest. I have had the worst opinion about Holy Priest in terms of all the healers, in terms of fun, in terms of difficulty. It used to be the easiest healer. I don't know if it's the easiest healer anymore, and not because it's intrinsically difficult. I could see it being an easy healer, not just an average. I'm gonna keep it an average for now, because it can be slightly of a trap. You can find yourself, or at least myself, I found myself as an easy healer in situations where I kind of panicked a little bit trying to keep people up because they were taking too much damage, and I was out of the flow of rotating my miracles. I played a miracle build. I don't know if a lot of Holy Priests played the miracle build, where you just weave in Flash of Lights with Flash heals, not Flash of Lights, Flash heals with heals, which is actually a reliable playstyle. But if something happens and you're kind of taken out of the flow, then you don't have your holy words, you have to pop Apotheosis, or maybe you still have, you know, a couple of flashlights that flash heals, goddammit, why do I keep saying that, to kind of do. I found it hardest to deal damage with Holy Priest out of all of the healers, and that's a part of what goes into being a good healer, especially if you want to optimize. You don't have to, thankfully. Now in Dragonflight, in 10.5 specifically, it's not as much pressure on healers to deal damage as it was before. Probably a lot of it has to do with the fact that healers just do, even if you do focus on damage, you do significantly less damage unless you're a Resto Druid. Well, we'll get to that in a minute. But since even if you do hard focus on damage, it's like whatever. Tanks probably still will do twice your damage, and DPS probably 4 to 5 to 6 times your damage. So it helps, but it's not going to be the end of the world if you just focus on keeping people alive, CCing. Plus, you do have a lot of jobs on your table, on your plate, with all of the dispels, all of the affixes that you have to do, especially as a priest, especially as a holy priest, with the mind controls, with the mass dispels and all of that stuff. You have your hands full, okay? Now, I can definitely make an argument. If I did play Holy Priest maybe for like a month and just do keys and raids, I could probably see it being easy. I don't know if it's as easy as Resto Shaman, but I feel like right now Holy Priest has received a level of death that ranks it a little bit on the harder side. Not too hard though. Mistweaver, probably one of the most interesting and fun healers to play. Now, in terms of difficulty, I would probably put it around the hard. Again, this I cannot help but be slightly subjective. Mistweaver is probably my second or third played healer that I've played consistently over the years. I always loved Mistweaver. I always loved fist weaving. I think the intricacies of playing the 10-2-5 version of Mistweaver takes it a little bit on the harder difficulty side because of how certain mechanics work, because of, I think you play the Clouded Focus build, or you could. The raid build feels a little bit more difficult. It's super fun to have a lot of burst healing and a lot of throughput. You have massive single target healing, which is amazing, kind of like the polar opposite of Discipline Priest, but you also have giga burst AoE healing. You would say, why would you ever play a Discipline Priest at that point? Well, Discipline Priest has probably, no, not probably, definitely better defensives, better cooldowns, better utility. Sure, Ring of Peace is nice, AoE stun is nice, and Incap is nice as well, but outside of the unique dispel that Mistweaver has over Discipline Priest in certain dungeons, you don't really have damage reduction cooldowns, you don't really have mass dispels outside of revival, but I don't know. But that aside, the intricacies of playing Mistweaver, specifically in raids, I found it a little bit more difficult than it used to be. It used to be a lot easier in raids playing Rising Mist and the similar playstyle, but now it's a little bit more if you want to heal efficiently, and if you do heal efficiently, you'll have so much throughput, so much HPS, man. It's a blast, and it takes a little bit of learning because you do weave in casting and fist weaving, and you'll enjoy it. But you know, be prepared to learn a little bit to optimize your Mistweaver. Preservation, I used to rank it as the hardest healer to play. Now, I don't think it's the hardest one. I still think it's harder than most other healers to play properly because of its combo system. It's probably easier to play than in the first season, or at least I find it easier to play now than it was in 10.0. Maybe because I've played it more since then, I have more experience on the spec, I kind of understand how the combos work. It also feels like the damage intake of people is not as high, at least obviously the 20s now are way easier to do than the 20s were in season 1, so you don't have to burst heal that much. But it's still combo based. You still have to, you know, make sure that you don't mess up your stasises, or, you know, kind of make sure that you have cooldown sufficient. Maybe it's just the season, man. Maybe it's just the dungeon pool. Maybe it's just the raid that makes it a little bit easier for preservation. Well, preservation in the old raid was easy still. However, it is a squishy healer that you really need to keep your eyes on. You do have to fly a little bit around, especially if you play the Dream Flight. You have Dream Flight as well, and you have Deep Breath as well, so you kind of have to be aware of your positioning, and you think that's, well, I'm just gonna be safe, man. Sure, but the amount of puddles that you'll have to dodge is out of this world, not to mention that the animation for the flight, although it's really cool, it is slow. So you think that, you know, if you fly now over your group, whether it is in raids or in dungeons or over mobs, and you think there's plenty of time, I have time to like dodge all the AoEs, not land in a stun or whatever, or in a frontal. By the time you finish your animation, like 2 dungeons have already passed. Like some people drank their coffee already and 2 new packs have been pulled by the tank, something like that. So that can offset some of it, but if you play preservation, I can definitely see it bump down to average. But then again, if you do play it in higher and higher keys, you're probably going to hit more obstacles with preservation than maybe with other healers as well. Resto Druid, the OG, the MDI neck turner that we have right now, the actual healer with actual DPS that matters. Now, Resto Druid has always been one of the harder healers to play. Do I think it's harder than Holy Paladin? Personally, I don't find it harder than Holy Paladin, but I find it harder than most other healers, so it's probably going to go into the hardest. It's not easy by a long shot. Mostly because as a druid, you do have a lot of things that you can do that is outside of the realm of healing, which you might think, but that's not what I signed up for. Well, maybe, but maybe not if you do play druid, because people do expect you to do druidy things like, you know, do some damage in cat form or moonkin form. You want to, you know, do all of that while also keeping people alive. And keeping people alive is also presuming you do your ramp properly, you do your cooldowns properly. Sure, there are some easy parts of Resto Druid where you just pop growth tenders and they can sometimes heal, and if you're in a low enough key, that really doesn't matter. However, the numbers that you can pull with the Resto Druid are crazy, and the only way you can do that is if you really know what you're doing. So it can be a difficult healer, not to mention that you are Squish, you're a druid after all. Sure, it's easier for you to, shift into bear form and be a little bit more tanky. You have some defensives, but you normally kind of want to reserve those for your tanks on, some difficult tyrannical keys when there are some bosses that really slap. I'm looking at you, Tree in Darkheart Thicket. God damn it, stop slapping the tanks so hard. Or Tree in Wakecrest Manor, I guess. Those are usually the bosses that come to mind first when it comes to, having a hard time healing people. With that aside, Resto Druid can get easier the more you play it. Obviously, that's true with all healers, but it is a level of depth and complexity that not every healer goes through. So this is how it looks like. The easiest healer is definitely Resto Shaman. Maybe Holy Priest can be a little bit closer to Resto Shaman, but I'm gonna keep it like this because it pisses some people off, and you let us know right there. But at the end of the day, you can just play it and have fun and listen. If you're also looking for an easy range DPS spec to pick up alongside your healer, you can check our video out that we have on the easiest range DPS specs to play in both raids and Mythic Plus, and get back to work.